Good morning from the Swedish winter. This is another angle of attack on this reflection about Star Trek content. It's more or less in response to Anthony's comment, but it's not a head-to-head debate. I'm kind of beginning with a yes and. And it's probably more for the benefit of third parties who are interested in what we're thinking rather than, as I say, some sort of clash of views. The topic at hand is looking at the original series and, for lack of a better word, asking, how racist is this? Or how, progressive is this? Or whatever word you want to, broad or narrow, that you want to use. I want to refer to a conversation that KC and I had, the fellow player. And the interesting point for him, having not seen the original series particularly before, was recognizing that the Prime Directive is a detail of an episode or a few episodes that imitated the one that it was introduced in, was never referred to outside of that context, and clearly is a throwaway feature of this or that episode. The episodes are not in particular setting continuity at all. And so therefore, there's no reason to say that part of the setting of the original series is the Prime Directive. So if you sort of throw that out as recognize it as an episode feature here and there, rather than a dedicated notion of, who these people are and how they live. And then you also recognize, and you should instantly upon watching any episode of the original series, that not only is it not a post-scarcity society or technology, there's not even a mention of any such thing, not as an ideal, not as a potential, not as developing, nothing. Mining is mining, money is money, grain is grain, import is import. The plagues are endemic. It's a given that people are subject to, epidemics, and it's a big history of many episodes. So the notion of it as I say, Gunsmoke in space is very clear. The notion of the rather, advanced future is really not there. The interesting point for what Anthony said, he talks about the characters in the show referring to the lack of racism. And I'm trying to remember. Anthony knows the chapter and verse of the dialogue of every episode more completely than I do. But I'm pretty conversant with a lot of it. And I'm trying to think of an instance where the characters talk about, well, we're past all that. And I'm not sure I can remember any specific instances. I'm not saying they're not there. But I am reminded of the episode where we're dealing with, individuals who have been popped there from the 20th century, and the crew are trying to tell them how great the society is. And a lot of it doesn't really it doesn't wash. It sounds like this is what members of a believing military would say. I'm not saying that the show deliberately paints them as hypocrites or deluded, but the show definitely says this is what these characters would say. And there's no, how am I going to put it? There's no evidence in the show of that great society. So I guess what I'm driving at, if you, as well as KC put it very nicely, if you take out the Prime Directive and if you take out the post-scarcity, the next generation kind of collapses, was KC's word. And he's right. It does. And I like that. No slam on the next generation, particularly, but more in the sense that we don't have to treat that perspective on the original series as valid. So when characters in the show, when and if they do talk about how, well, we're past all that terrible racism, you're kind of going, Is that really what the show is presenting as text? I'm not interested in creator intent at all. I'm talking about the text of the show. Is that what it's presenting? And as far as I can tell, it's not presenting it at all. Yes, the particular details of 1960s racism, which frankly aren't particularly different from those here in 2020. If you say, okay, clearly, the members of the Starship and the Federation culture and whatever are not really invested in those things, but it doesn't mean they're not invested in racist phenomena. It's blatantly obvious with Spock, and whether you want to consider that to be cringy humor or whether you want to say, wait a minute, this text actually does include racism. And that the show is, if you want to put it this way, saying that, yeah, it's there. This is a thing. This is how we deal with problems and the problems that we have. And no one ever calls that out. Apparently, it's okay. Kirk uses racist language in order to, break Spock out of mind control and stuff like that. But other characters just use it as, casual abuse, and that's that. So and that's not alone. It's not just Spock, although it is worth pointing out. You say, okay, well, apparently the details of 20th century and 21st century, ethnic abuse apparently seem to have been dialed down, at least in this military culture. But is the phenomenon still with us? And the answer is, yeah, of course it is. And I would venture to say that if there were a spirit of the original series that we could ascribe intent to, it would look at you in puzzlement and say, yes. And then you would say, but isn't it about the utopian society that's past all that? And that spirit of the original series would say, what in God's name are you babbling about? And so my take really is to, now, I'm not going to go through every last little episode. I mean, I can always ask Anthony. Where and when, and this isn't like a rebuttal, prove it. It's just curiosity. Where and when and to whom do characters in the show talk about their society and the problems that it has solved? And we find, at least in my memory, which is, as I say, pretty good, not encyclopedic, but pretty good for this. I have rewatched the series in recent memory. I don't recall a whole lot that would textually justify me saying, yes, that society is indeed past all that. And I refer to this as a virtue. That saying, see, the show's hypocritical. No, that's exactly the wrong thing. The show just isn't saying that thing that later fans say it says. So the fault lies with them, not with the show. The show actually, I think, is right to present, confront, problematize, not necessarily solve these specific things.